after estimation, we will see about the project risk. But before going into detail, how to handle project risk and how to identify first of all the project risk, first I want you to just analyze this question and write down points. How do you handle risk in your projects? Have you ever identified the high priority risk? And the risk priority keeps on changing, because for example currently you will have certain high priority risk, but that could change over the time if you have mitigated the risk. So for example, I can take two examples here. One is, if you have a two-member team, then definitely the risk is that there could be high dependency on the resources, because only two people are there, you don't have backup resources to handle the task. So then what are the mitigation plans? One is that you could ask them to document all the business core logics, the functionalities. That is one part of it. The second part could be that you talk to your senior management and ask your client for billability, and also you form a backup resource. So that is one part. And another example of risk could be that as a project manager, you're new to the project and you're forming a team that is also new. Now, since the project is new, the customer is new, you will take some time to develop the relationship with the customer. So how you have planned, because it could be in some cases risk. I'm not saying risk, but it will take some time. But for the years, if you have spent time in the project for 1 year, but you don't have a good relationship with the client, then it could be a risk due to a number of reasons. Practically, it can happen the client is not satisfied with the quality of the deliverables, the products that we are delivering to them. So in practical scenarios, there could be a number of situations. So I want you to analyze how you have note down your risk in your project and what are your mitigation plan. And another thing could be that certain times a customer, from the customer stakeholders point of view, like certain times your project is not priority for them, they don't have time for your project. That could also be a risk, because if you don't follow the process of sign off, then the client suddenly turns up at the deliverable stage and they say, no, this is not the product I'm expecting. Then this is a high risk. So every stage have a different level of risk, and there is a way to mitigate those risks. And as a project manager, it is important to analyze with your team leads, with your core resources, because certain times you have experienced people in your team, so you can sit with them so that they can also come up with mitigation plan. So it's very important to know how to handle risk in your projects. So when we say about project risk, so what are the project risk? And when we consider the project risk, so there are certain times, like we have told that in estimation you add contingency. So that's why you identify risk and certain amount of time in your estimation. So risk management is considered a part of the planning process, because when you are planning at the initial stages, there are a lot of issues. When you are new to the project, when the project is developed from the scratch, then there are enormous number of risks. It could be people risk. It can happen that you are not getting the correct skilled resources for the project. So that could be one of the risks. And second is, there could be a risk that you are skipping the deadline. You cannot complete the project with the mentioned deadline from the customer because you don't have resources. Or there could be a risk of, first of all, certain types of the project have a risk that they don't have a clear requirements. So first of all, you need to identify the potential risk. It is risk is are no more than elements that might go wrong in your project. They could be internal or there could be external risk. So what you do for external risk? There could be certain risks which are not in your hand. For example, you are working on a product, but the core product has been developed by some other team which is not under your control and sitting somewhere else. So in those cases, the identified risk, it has to be transferred to that department, or it has to be handled through your higher management, because you don't have control on those type of risk. And the external risk could be from the customers also, as I mentioned that the requirements are delayed, the client don't have time to sign off, I have seen in a number of cases in my project, IT projects, certain times we have as a team delivered the project and the contract is a fixed bid. We are not getting paid for the idle time the team is sitting. So on those cases, and if you are following an iterative SDLC method, then what happens is the team sit idle unless and until the client says go ahead, and then you start working on the another set of requirements, because certain times the client gives a very delayed sign off and they don't come up with a new requirement. So these are potential risks, because if you're not generating any money to the project, definitely your senior management will ask why so many resources are idle. So all these things are risks to a project. So what are the stages of the risk management plan? The process is, first you identify the potential risk, then you have to rate them by likelihood and severity and choose which risk to plan for, because there could be risks which are very severe. Some application has gone live and there could be some defects which needs to be fixed immediately, so they are very very severe issues. Or there could be a core team member who is leaving and the entire component deliverable is there dependent on him or her, and it can happen that we need to deliver it. Certain cases we need to communicate it to the stakeholders, so certain time there could be some ad hoc situation comes up, and we can skip the deadline of the project. So these are important, that you need to choose the risk which has to be mitigated and make plans for dealing with those risks. The process you use to complete the initial identification step is entirely up to you. So we need to do mitigation plans. But what I am saying is, as a project manager, when the project starts, because each stage the risk needs to be identified on the initiation stage and the planning stage and the execution stage, and each time the risk priority and severity they keep on changing. So and certain times you need to identify the common risk also, and then you need to rate each risk, first on the likelihood of its occurrences and then on its severity, how frequently it can occur, those risks that you need to point out. The simply you have to rate it from the 5 point scale, or even a high, medium, low selection to rate the risk on your list. So again, this template varies according to company. So whatever the template you are following, you need to rate the risk. So for example, the risk could be like, for a two team member project, the risk of leaving one resource, what are the likelihoods that's important to rate, and accordingly the severity need to be mentioned. So when the risk is pretty severe, for example, if we are talking about that the new technology has to be learned by the team, and the team resources they don't have any idea of the new technology, so we need to define the severity high, because your team does not know the technology and the client has given you a deadline. So in these cases you need to come up with a mitigation plan wherein you can ask your senior resources or senior technical architects to come in, help your team and mentor your team in the new technology. This is how you mitigate the risk. The aim of rating the risk is to allow you to decide which one you are going to plan for. So there is no hard and fast rules for this. The risk you choose to plan will depend on your own organization's culture and your own attitude to risk. Typically, though, you wouldn't plan for risks that are extremely unlikely to occur, but it is better to keep a mitigation plan ready. So, when we call about mitigation plan, it all again depends on how to focus on the current one. For example, your core team member is leaving. Then definitely the mitigation plan should be immediate, that you need to follow a succession plan. First of all, you need to find out a resource who will be replacement for the resource who is leaving, and then you need to have a knowledge transfer sessions. You need to plan the knowledge transfer sessions, and then you need to transfer all the knowledge from the core resource to the new resource. So sometimes there could be a mitigation plan regarding the technology. For example, the server need upgradation. All these, the production server needs upgradation. All these things, the mitigation plan, sometimes we think as a project manager, we think that it is not needed, we can just postpone this course of action. But it is very important, the expert project manager, they always rely on their judgment. So sometimes whenever the team is sitting idle, you always get a sometimes a buffer time in certain projects where the client has not he has not signed off the earlier products. Then in those idle time you can work out on these issues, and you can just close off the risk. So it's very important that not to ignore small issues or small risk which we consider that currently the likelihood is very it cannot happen, but it is important to deal with those and come up with mitigation plan. Risk management is very critical for all the projects, and I'm sure that all of us face some or the other risk. Certain projects the resources risk are high, in certain projects the technology is so complex and the framework is so complex that the technology part is very complex, so that could be one of the risks. In certain projects the team dynamics can be an issue that we will see later, that how a team building can be handled by a project manager. Because yes, planning is necessary, the technical things handling is necessary, the designing and everything is necessary, but at the end we are handling people. So in certain case, trust me, like I have faced those kind of issues where the team members does not gel with each other, there's always a conflict. And yeah, sometimes the conflicts are good, but if it is happening regularly, then as a project manager, to manage the people, it's one of the tasks. So we need to see why they are not doing it sometimes, and these conflicts that can impact the productivity of the team. So this could be one of the risks. So whether it is a people issue or a technical issue or it could be some project specific project issues, as a project manager we need to clearly plan out, prioritize the risk, and according to severity we need to handle the risk and come up with the mitigation plan and close the risk.